All right, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about a little bit of a mix up to bowl season. Hopefully, we will see less opt outs, more players on the field during those games, which I think is something everyone can get behind. But let's get into some spring overreactions. There has been a ton of stuff going on during spring and a ton of reports coming out. And let's be honest, we all love to overreact, we all love to get excited about our particular team. So if you're an SEC fan, you might want to stick around because I might have one for your team. But let's jump right in and let's go over to Lexington, Kentucky and talk about Brock Vandagriff. I think when you talk about Kentucky, one of the big things that has been missing, especially during the Mark Stoops era, is elite quarterback play. And now that came to a certain extent when Will Levis was in town. He had a couple of years that were very good. His junior year went for about 2,800 yards in 2021, 24 touchdowns, and 10 picks. So that was probably his best year. He had 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 10 picks in his senior year. So it was kind of a couple of good years. Not necessarily anything to light the world on fire, not necessarily what they had hoped when he came over from Penn State. And kind of the same thing happened with Devin Leary a year ago, where you have all these hyped up prospects coming in. You have this quarterback that you feel can run your offense really well, and it just never quite clicks. And that's something that happened for Kentucky, especially on the offensive side of the ball a year ago. But Brock Vandagriff is in town, and I feel like everything has changed almost overnight. You hear so many reports coming out of spring over and over about this kid just not only being incredible on the field, which is something I had very little doubts about. The arm talent on this kid is just out of this world. So I wasn't super worried about what he was going to be as a quarterback on the field. But off the field, this is the first time he was taking over the reins as the starting guy. This is the first time he was being the vocal and emotional and, leader of this team. The first time he had to be that guy in the locker room, and he's taking the bull by the horns, it sounds. It sounds like he is the vocal leader of this team. It sounds like he is all over the place when it comes to being the person that you need to be successful in the SEC, especially as a quarterback. And you combine all of that, the energy that he's coming with, the the mindset that he comes with, the place that he's coming from in UGA. I think you put all that together with the group that he has in front of him, with Barry and Brown, Dane Key, Jamori Macklin, all catching passes from him. A great offensive line, to be totally honest with you. Very, very good players. Marquise Cox is going to be a fantastic player for them this upcoming year. And then a defense who I think is going to be one of the most surprising defenses in the entire country. This team has dudes at every single level. I think they have, Deone Walker is one of the best players in the entire country, period. You have J.J. Weaver coming off the edge. You have Damon Dumas-Johnson you brought in from UGA along with Brock Vandagriff at linebacker. You have Maxwell Harrison on the back end. There's just talent all over this roster, and I think they're going to give him some short fields. They're going to give him some ability to get a couple more drives under his belt, and I just think Brock Vandagriff's going to have an elite year and possibly override what Levis did during his 2 years at Kentucky. So will be a really interesting thing to watch. I think Brock Vandagriff is ready to roll, to be totally honest with you. But let's move on to Tennessee and talk about another quarterback that is ready to take the reins in Nico Iamaleava. He is someone that I really think can challenge that 2022 season from Hendon Hooker. And now that sounds lofty, and I totally understand that that is a crazy take, because when you look at Hendon Hooker, that 2022 season was downright special. Before he went down with that torn ACL, that kid was the Heisman favorite. And frankly, I think he should have been in New York City regardless of the injury, but that's a totally different discussion that probably could have happened 2 years ago, but I'll leave that in the past for now. But Iamaleava has the ability to jump over Hendon Hooker. Now, it could be that this year is a little bit more of a learning process, but the kid looks ready to go. He's been absolutely ripping it in spring practice. Everyone has been absolutely glowing about this kid, and you have the wide receivers to go along with it. You have Dante Thornton, you have Squirrel White, Chaz Nimrod, Mike Matthews, who's a huge freshman coming in from Parkview High School in Georgia. So plenty to work with on the offensive side of the ball. And then when you have Josh Heupel on your right-hand hip and in your ear coming up to the snap, I think it's just going to be a match made in heaven is the way I was supposed to say that. I think he fits that offense perfectly. I think he has elite arm talent, and I think this kid could just light the world on fire and make Tennessee fans very, very excited about 2025. I'm not sure what 2024 looks like in terms of SEC championship or anything like that, but 2025, it could get really interesting in Knoxville. But Ole Miss is a team that everyone has been talking about a lot, and frankly, this team could absolutely be in Atlanta at the end of the year, and that's kind of what I have for them as an overreaction. Again, an overreaction, I want that to be said, but Lane Kiffin, the first couple of years at Ole Miss, it felt like kind of a revving car. It felt like the wheels were spinning, everything was kind of being set in place, but you hadn't put it into gear yet. And it feels like they put it into gear a little bit last year, and then especially with some of the transfers they brought in, I think they have fully put this thing into drive and are ready to start flying forward. So Jackson Dart throwing the ball to Trey Harris, Juice Wells, Caden Prieskorn is insane. Three guys that you would be tough to find better three guys across the entire country when it comes to those three positions. I think it's just going to be remarkably efficient, remarkably smooth. Jackson Dart going into his third year in the offense. It's going to be a thing of beauty, to be totally honest with you, on the offensive side of the ball the majority of the time. But then when you look at the defense, you have Walter Nolan coming in, Princely Umanmielen coming in. Chris Paul is going to be a great linebacker for them, not Chris Paul, but a transfer from Arkansas at linebacker. And then Trey Amos, I think, is going to start from them at corner. So just so much talent, and it's going to totally change the complexion of this team, hopefully make them a defensive team that at least can keep up, right? And that's kind of the biggest goal for them. You know, you don't have to be outright dominant, but you at least have to be able to slow down some of these offenses. You get UGA at home, which is the team that you would probably have to overcome to get to Atlanta. So a lot of things are pointing in their direction. And I think as long as this offense can run the way that they're supposed to run, as long as some of these defensive transfer guys can hit the way that they have at other programs. I mean, Walter Nolan was incredible at Texas A&M. Princely Umanmielen was incredible at Florida, and the same thing with Chris Paul Jr. Brandon Turnage was a great player. So all of this stuff, I think, is coming together for Ole Miss. This is the year where it feels like everything is in place. Everything is about as good as you could possibly hope it to be, and it might just take them to Atlanta at the end of the year. So it'll be really interesting to watch what happens with Ole Miss. I think they might be the most interesting team in the entire country going into this year, partly because of the main man they have up top, but also the team they put together is just out of this world talented. But let's move on and let's talk about who I consider to be the best player in the SEC, one of the best players in the entire country, and that's Luther Burden. I think this kid is out of this world. I think he is as good as you get at the wide receiver position for a number of reasons. You can line him up all over the field. He will run any route you possibly want. He's great after the catch. The catch radius is off the charts. And he's Brady Cook's instinctive target, which is a huge part of this, right? We have so many guys on that team. I mean, Theo Weiss and Mookie Cooper will have fantastic years. I have no doubt about that. But when you need a play, you know where they're going, and you know that he's going to make the play 9 times out of 10. I think this kid is just on a different level. And now Totori McMillan over there at Arizona is a fantastic player who absolutely will rival him for the Politnikoff and that top wide receiver position in the NFL draft next year. But I think when you look at what Luther Burden is capable of, not only, you know, from a route tree perspective, but just the connection that he has with Brady Cook, I think it's something that is just a little bit further along than Noah Fafita and Totori McMillan. Not to say that that is a bad connection by any means, but I think there will be a point in the season where people will start looking at 2024 Luther Burden and say, this looks a little bit like 2020 Devontae Smith in terms of numbers, not in terms of play style by any means, but I'm not sure if he'll be able to join Devontae Smith and Desmond Howard as the only Heisman winners that were wide receivers, but this kid, if anyone can do it, I think this kid is one of them that absolutely can. So very excited for what he can do. He's one of my favorite players in the entire country, to be totally honest with you, and he's going to light the world on fire. It's just, does it come in the way of a Biletnikoff? Does it come in the way of one of the best wide receiver seasons we've seen in quite some time? So I think a lot's on the table, but let's move over to another wide receiver that I think is going to set the world on fire, and Cam Coleman. Now, this one might be a little bit more benign than the others that I've thrown out there, because this kid is definitely the betting favorite. I don't know if there's odds on it out right now, but I think this kid, Cam Coleman, will almost assuredly be the SEC Freshman of the Year, barring injury. This kid is absolutely out of this world. Now, there's still dudes that will give him a run for their money. You have Colin Simmons over at Texas. Ryan Williams is coming into Bama very soon. Williams-Nwaneri over at Missouri. LJ McCray at Florida. Tons of really, really talented freshmen coming into the SEC that are ready to kind of ruin this for Cam Coleman, but this kid just looks further along. He looks like he's going to play a bigger part in his offense than some of those other kids will in their offense or defense, respectively. So I think this kid is going to make big play after big play. He's going to make the SEC, the Sports Center top 10 over and over and over again throughout the year. I think he's going to make Auburn fans very, very excited, and I would not be surprised at all if he was in Biletnikoff talks, because this dude is really good. But I'll temper my expectations just a little bit, give him SEC Freshman of the Year, and he'll move forward from there, I'm sure. But let's get to one last one, and this one has to do with the Aggies over there in College Station. I think this Texas A&M team is being a little bit overlooked, and I think there's some things to be skeptical of. Obviously, you lost a number of players through the portal. You have a number of things that just aren't quite the way it's going to you'd like it to be. Mike Elko coming in this first year, Connor Wegman coming back from an injury, not really sure what you're going to get from him. But I think this team has a lot of really, really good things in place. The talent level is still very high, despite all of those guys that found their way elsewhere. Nick Scourton coming in from Purdue is as big of a transfer portal pickup as you will find in this cycle. Shamar Stewart is going to be incredible on that D-line as well. They're going to tear teams apart on the offensive line. I'll be totally honest with you. This is going to be a very aggressive attack. And with Mike Elko calling the shots, it's going to be a defense that hits you in the face a couple of times. I'm going to be totally honest with you. There are so many ways that this team can beat you, but the way that I look at it is they're going to be we're going to make you beat us. We're not going to beat ourselves type of team. You're going to have to beat us down. You're going to have to, deal with a defense that is not going to give you an inch. And you're going to have to grind away and come out, scratched and bloodied and bruised and all of that good stuff when you talk about Mike Elko's teams. And I think it's going to cause problems for some teams. A&M has Notre Dame, LSU, Missouri, and most importantly, obviously, Texas at the end of the year, all on their schedule. Now, I don't know if they're going to be the knockout punch for some of these playoff teams' hopes, but I do think they're going to spoil some of them, and it's going to make some of these roads to the playoff for some of these teams a lot thinner, a lot quicker. So that Notre Dame game is very interesting because you get it at Kyle Field. Texas, you get at Kyle Field as well. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this team unfold. I think there's a chance that they win some games they're not supposed to win, but lose some games they're not supposed to lose. But I think they'll get off to a right start, and I think one of these wins will happen, and it'll shock some people, that's for sure. But it'll be really interesting to watch all of this unfold. Spring is obviously a time where we get into some overreactions, and we get a little bit excited about our teams, get a little bit maybe too amped up, but who cares, right? It's a very, very fun thing to do around this time of year, so we're going to continue doing it. We'll bounce around to different conferences as the next week goes through, but this is a really great idea. Shout out to Tom Fernelli over at CBS for kind of inspiring this idea in me. I promise I did not steal his ones, but I thought this was a really fun idea, so I thought I would throw mine out there, but we'll definitely continue with this. But let's take our final break here, and when we come back, we got a transfer portal update for you. Some big-time commitments came off the board, and there's still a lot of guys out there to be had, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I want to break down everything for you guys right after this, so stick with us.